Welcome to the Market Mystics podcast. I'm Joshua.
I'm Kim. Let's dive in.
Hello, listeners. Welcome back to another episode. We are glad you are here. Kim, I'm glad you're here. Although you are not feeling 100% optimal, I'm glad you're here.
Thank you. Today, my voice is a little gravelly, not because I just woke up, but I don't know that there's any amount of singing I could possibly do to make it better.
That is funny. We did recently talk about your love of
car singing.
Yeah, I was gonna dashboard karaoke or
Something.
Steering wheel karaoke, something.
It is my vocal warm-up for the day, and it is a very important part of my psyche too. It sets the tone for the day.
Yeah, I love it. Okay, well, let's hop into this. I wanted to bring this idea of, which we've sort of touched on in some previous episodes, but the difference of being led somewhere and being told how to get there, I guess. I'm trying to think of a good way to phrase the difference. So in my notes, what I wrote down was it's important to help teach people how to problem solve and not just tell them the answer or how to do it in every situation. But that feels so nuanced to me because there are times when you just need someone to know how to do it.
That's funny. It's funny because when you presented that topic, I thought the exact opposite. I thought about how important it is to be led somewhere as opposed to just bulldoze in and be well, I know how to get there, so I'm going there. I think about in the heavenly realms and spiritual aspects, just because you know that there is this portal where spirits do something or whatever. It's not always advisable to just go bulldoze your way in there if you're not led to go do something there. So it's funny. It is very nuanced because that's kind of where my mind was going with what you said.
No, I totally see that, especially in the engaging heaven mindset of it. And we've even had an episode we called The Led Life about the importance of allowing Father to lead you places. And I do think that's important, but I've noticed in my life the way he leads is by helping me learn to solve the problem. He doesn't just point and say, okay, now there.
Yeah. So talk about that a little bit more.
Yeah. I think especially what comes to mind is this idea of where the Bible talks about God hides things and keen search it out. And I think he does that for, it's a reward for those who are willing to look, but it's also I think part of the maturing process. So we just got a puppy, and I've been watching all sorts of puppy training videos, which I think 90% of them are useless. But one thing I saw that I thought was really interesting was you can buy these puzzle feeder bowls for animals where they have to figure out how to do it in order to get the food. And the person was yeah, those are great for the first week that your dog has them. And then they just know how it works. And then all it does is slow them down and maybe physically exercise them, but it's no longer a mental exercise. And so they were talking about what they've started doing with their dog is they play hide and seek with their food. So they just put it in different random places inside or outside, and their dog has to go search it out. And sometimes they leave little trails of things for them to find. But I was thinking about how okay, in a puppy, that mental stimulation is what encourages growth. It's what encourages them to be a smarter dog. And that same thing has to apply to us. Like, the more you are challenged to problem solve, the better your mind is going to be in any type of a problem. And I have felt that way with the way God has led me in my life. Is he may lead me to a situation or to a set of problems, and sometimes he may drop a little hint or something, but many times I felt that it was up to me to figure out how to navigate through that. And so I think there's like this really sweet spot of like being led by the Father and not my will in every situation, but also being able to problem solve. Like, I think that's part of maturity, is being able to problem solve.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's almost like being led into exploration. And we've talked about this before. I feel like I've talked about it too much, but there's something really important about the seeking. And I think that's, at least from how you're describing this, that's what it reminds me of. You know, like, yes, the Father will lead you somewhere, but won't always give you all of the answers. But sometimes it's so that you will seek, right? It's not just being spoon fed or bottle fed. I mean, if we want to talk about maturity, and even with your puppy, you know, there's something about, they know exactly where to go to get fed, and they get fed, and then they have a full belly, and then they're happy. But at some point, like, in order for them to mature, in order for us to mature, we have to learn how to feed ourselves. And then we have to learn how to acquire the food ourselves and feed ourselves. And then we might have to learn how to, like, grow the food, get the food, feed ourselves. And then it may be that we have to grow the food, harvest the food, feed ourselves, feed others.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think the others is a big piece of that, because like, as you mature, everything that you do should extend beyond you. Like, as you grow, your dreams, your visions, your plans should include others. And so, like, I think about you and Jason and like starting a business. Well, you start a business because you see a need and you want some extra cash and you think this will be successful. But then it gets to a point where all of a sudden now you are like supporting employees through that thing that you started. And it's just like, I think it's part of a natural progression that we bring others alongside into our dreams and our visions. And that's part of like the problem solving, because then when you are running a business or you are doing something, like, now it's not just, oh, well, I can let this go tomorrow if I need to because it's just me. But now it's like, oh, well, now I have employees, and what do I, like, now I'm responsible for more than that. And the same thing can be said about like being single or in a relationship or having kids. Like, the way you live your life is a lot different, and it's not good or bad. It's different because you now have like other people. Like, now your decisions impact more than just yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's super important. And I do think that's part of the maturing. I also don't think that you throw people headfirst into that, you know, because if they don't know how to, back to the example, feed themselves, it's going to be very difficult for them to figure out how to feed others as well. But I was also thinking about, I don't know what I was thinking about because I've just lost my train of thought. What were you talking about?
Well, like having others involved in your dreams and your destiny was the most recent thing we were talking about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't know. It'll come back.
No, that's all right. I do think that there's you can't just plop them in like you were talking about. Like you can't just throw someone in and say, okay, now figure it out. Like there's a handful of people who you can do that with who will survive and who will find a way. But I would venture to say the majority of the people, that would be crushing to them in order to do that. And so you do start with little things. You do start at like a puzzle that they can figure out. And then you make the puzzle more complicated. And it's like when you're a kid and you have the like box that has the different shaped blocks you put in it. Like you start with something where there's 5 different shapes. And eventually you're doing a 5,000 piece puzzle. Like it doesn't, but you don't just start at the 5,000 piece puzzle. You start with the 5 shapes.
Yeah. Yeah. That's exactly what I was going to touch on. It was about problem solving and how even being led into a place where you need to explore and you need to seek on your own. When the Father leads you there and allows you that breadth to figure it out on your own, even when it's in the minutia, in the really small and seemingly insignificant things. I think what he's doing is he's setting you up so that you're capable of operating that way without complete devastation when something bigger comes along that you then also need to problem solve with. Like being, like you were talking about being a business owner, it's, if you have never problem solved before and all of a sudden you are responsible for 5, 10, 20, 50 other people and some issue comes up that you don't know how to do, you don't know how to figure it out, or you don't even know how to handle it because you've never had to solve anything, it can cause huge issues for more than just you. Right? But when there's problem solving going on all along the way, I think it builds that, I guess, muscle. I don't know if that's a muscle, like the ability to be able to figure things out. Not that you'll always have the answers, but you'll know where to look and you'll know how to start figuring things out. And you might have a better idea of who to ask. Those kinds of things. I don't think this means that then you can figure out anything all on your own always. Like, at least I'm not there. I don't know.
Yeah, it makes me think of this study, and I'm pretty sure we just recently talked about it on an episode, but where they took a group of kids and they had some of them and told them, okay, you have 5 minutes to draw the best picture you can draw. And then they told the other group of kids, okay, draw as many pictures as you can in 5 minutes. And the kids who were able to draw as many as they wanted generally ended up with better pictures because they learned that the value was in the process. Like they didn't have to worry about getting one perfect. They were able to try and try and try and try until they had an idea that they liked and they could take off with. And I think that same thing is true about problem solving. Like if you're put into a situation and you're told there's one right outcome, you got to figure it out and it's the only chance. Like that's so stressful and you may not do as good as you could if you were raised in an environment where the process is what was like celebrated.
That's interesting. I was thinking earlier about how some people do really well with tests and some people really do not do well with tests. And I'm only associating it because I was someone from when I was really young, I loved tests. I'm like, okay, so we did the learning. Now let me show you what I can do. Like that's how I saw it. Whereas I think for others, it's a mega stressor and it is a mega pressure to perform or maybe even to fail, or to not meet expectations. And I wonder what the difference in that mindset is. Like what is it that triggers the like, oh yeah, let me show you what I can do, versus the, oh man, what if I fail? What if I don't do good enough?
Yeah, I wonder, is that just part of a child's like DNA to get on, like to start with? Like, there's surely some kids who are just more prone to be like, I can regurgitate this perfectly. But also I think it's probably learned. Like there's part of it is learned. Like there's got to be a piece of it where early on you had an experience where you did a test and did great and were praised for it, and all of a sudden you were like, oh, this feels amazing when I do good on this. And so something like, probably happened when you were 1 or 2 or 3, like, and all of a sudden your mind is like, oh, this is super fun. Like, this gives me all the good chemicals when I do good, when someone asks me to do something.
So if we take that and apply that to spiritual things, so being led to a problem and then being given the instruction to figure it out or to explore. For some people that might come naturally. If like in their personality, they're already like, oh, great, a test. Let me show you what I can do. Yep. Let me get in there. Let me look around. What about for the people who it's frightening, Do you think, I would assume, I don't know this, I would assume the Father would lead in a different way then. What do you think?
I mean, I think he's personal enough that he would lead them at the point they're at. Mm-hmm. Although I do think sometimes he takes you to tests that
are uncomfortable.
Well, I want to say that even he knows you're not going to pass. Like, not in a malicious way, but sometimes it's that like learning to fail that helps the problem solving.
Yeah.
And so like, I don't want to say, like, I don't want that to come across in like a malicious, he's setting you up for failure type of way. But I think sometimes he takes you to situations where you have a very low probability of success so that you can learn what to do in those situations. Because that's just as important. Like, do you fail a test and get absolutely crushed by it? Or do you fail a test and like, okay, well, I see where I can do this and this and this differently next time. Like, there's two different things, and that is for sure learned. Like,
like perseverance is learned. Yeah. No, I would agree. I completely agree. I mean, I've had some of those instances with the Lord, and it felt less like a lesson and more like stretching. Like, here's what you're capable of today. We're going to do this. You will fail, but it will stretch you to be able to go a bit further. And even in multiple tries, it's not always perfect, but there's always the like open door and encouragement to continue. I think one of the beautiful things about being led to exploration is also being led to persevere. And it's never okay, now see your limitations. You can't do that. Let's go back to where we started. That has never happened, at least not in my experience. It has been, we're going to learn it and we'll try. And it kind of reshapes failure, because failure isn't really even on the table. It's just like a miss, or it's an incomplete, That's kind of how I see it.
Yeah. When you were talking about that, it makes me think of the verse in Proverbs that says, keep your heart with all diligence, for out of it flows like the limitations of life. And it's like this idea that you're kind of talking about of like your mindset in the situation, like your heart towards a situation, what you believe and what you think. Like, do you take that situation where it didn't work out the way you wanted it to and grow from it, or do you take it as like, okay, now that's a boundary? Like, there's two different ways of doing it, and it, like, my mind is immediately going to weightlifting, and it's like, okay, I failed lifting, whatever weight. Do you say, okay, well, I just can't get there, like, that's the end, that's my max? Or do you like ratchet back a little bit and keep growing, and then all of a sudden you hit a new record and then a new record? Like, it's incremental growth. But if you look at it as a limitation, it will become a limitation.
Yeah. Well, and even I am not any kind of practice in this area, but I know that there is one school of thinking in weightlifting, that you go to failure. Mm-hmm. Like, you don't go to see how far you can go. You go to see how far you can't go.
Yeah.
Like, you keep going until you can't. But then the next time you go, you'll go until you can't a little further.
Yeah. Even if it's just like half a pound further or one step further or whatever it is. Like, do you look at it as progress? Right. Do you look at every little increment as a step forward or more confirmation of the limitation? Like, I think that's where, like, in my mind, the like problem solving comes into play. Is you can look at that in two different ways. But if you have developed a mindset of problem solving, a limitation will never be a limitation.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's really good. I was also thinking about how important it is to like keep in the forefront of your mind who you are and be solid in that. Because I think with all of these words, like the failure and the can't and the max out and all of these things, it really could work in a way that could create limitations and could start defining who you are. Yeah. But I think when we keep our mindset on who the Father says we are, who we were created to be, who we are at the core of ourselves, any of those things no longer can like define how far we can go or become limitations. They just become, I guess, the boundary that gets stretched. It's the wall of the box you've got to break down. Yeah. You know what I mean? And so in problem solving, you're going to run up against a bunch of different walls. You're going to hit some walls. But can you back up and go find another one that can move a bit? Can you back up from that and find the one that has the door on it that's unlocked? Like, I mean, I think that's really it. It's the, can you continue on? Can you persevere through this? Because the wall that's immovable isn't the wall that defines you.
Yeah. That's good. That's a good thought. Good stuff today. I like it.
Good stuff. The good topic. I wasn't expecting it.
Well, I'm glad it turned into something, because sometimes I just like have these random thoughts and I put notes in my phone, but then I don't fully flesh out the like thought, and I'm like, surely that's enough for us to talk about.
That's fine. I think we've talked long enough over the years that probably we could talk about anything.
Yeah, I think that's true.
Okay.
All right. Well, we'll see you guys in a few days.
See ya.
Hey, thanks for listening. Keep up with us along this journey by liking, subscribing, and becoming a member through YouTube.
Members get exclusive access to bonus content with our guests, deeper dives into topics, and a look into other projects. We're glad to have you here. See you next time.